Eliza. Welcome to
Hello.
What If I Say Yes? How are you today?
I'm very good. Thanks. It's a beautiful day.
Good. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself to my audience. Who are you, Eliza?
Well, my name these days is Eliza Factor. I am a writer and a mother. I live in Brooklyn and on a beautiful farm in the Hudson Valley. I am very lucky to be able to schnuzzle goats and fight with roosters these days. It makes me very happy. Yeah, I guess I'm just a human being on a beautiful planet.
Okay. Now, can you tell the audience how we know each other or know of each other?
My wonderful friend Gisela introduced us just over the internet, and I really was intrigued with your project. I think it's very cool, and so I was like, sure, I'd love to participate.
Mm-hmm. So I know you. Gisela is one of my comadres. We're a group of 6 Mexican women who met in New York City when we were in graduate school. And then we just became this group that is very endearing. And we're co-mothers. We are just taking care of each other and of our kids at a distance and when we're together. So it's a beautiful, beautiful group that has lived for 23 years now.
Oh, that's great.
So Gisela is one of my comadres, and she let us know at one point that she had joined this wonderful organization that I believe you started, called Extreme Kids and Crew. I don't know if that has something to do with the years you're gonna.
Yes, it very much does.
Talk about. Okay, so I won't say much, but I was very intrigued by the idea and the organization. And then later on, I was doing freelance translations. And so later on, Gisela put me in touch with someone from that organization, and I translated some brochures into Spanish.
Thank you.
So I was more
maybe that's where your name, maybe that's what was popping up in my head, that your name came from that. Yeah.
That maybe, yes.
Yeah.
And I fell in love with it even more. So later on, I think, I don't know if Gisela shared it or I found your blog. So
Broken and Woken, that one, or it's a couple different blogs. The one, probably Broken and Woken. I started it, and then we started having other voices coming in.
No, it was one where only you.
Oh, okay. Maybe it's just Eliza.
How many do you have?
Well, I started one for Extreme Kids, and I was the one writing when I left. I started Extreme Kids, and then it got pretty big pretty quickly, and I couldn't be the director anymore because I had to spend time up in New Hampshire with my son, and also I just don't like the back office business of directing at all. So we found an executive director, and I became the president of the board. And they asked me to start a blog when I left being the director, because they wanted the kind of the spirit with which it was started very much present. And even if I wasn't like on the ground directing. So the blog kind of came out of that. So I was writing about disability and like trying to get people's understanding, like other people's understanding of what disability was. And it was just me for a couple of years. And then it's supposed to be a community, right? So I was like, it shouldn't just be my voice. And so then we opened it up to other people around the country writing about their experiences that touched on disability. And it was really a vibrant blog for a couple of more years. So it kind of went on for about 4 years. And then it just kind of, we couldn't get enough people just stopped submitting. And so we just kind of let it go. But then I have another, like I have a blog through Lonely Worm Farm now and through my writing thing, but it's not as
I believe that's the one I found.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
One, yes. The other one, I didn't know it existed.
Oh, okay. Great.
Anyway, well, now I know.
Yeah.
So yes, that's how I knew of you. And now I have the pleasure to meet you at least virtually.
Yeah. No, it's nice. That's good. Thank you
So
for
Eliza, now, because of all, after all these things that I just said out loud, um, one day I just contacted Gisela and said, do you think Eliza would say yes to come into my channel? Because I'm sure she has very interesting yeses in her life. So I sent the invitation and then you agreed, you said yes, and here we are.
Here we
So
are.
let's jump into the main question of this YouTube channel. Tell us of a moment in your life when you asked the question, what if I say yes? You then said yes and did something. I don't know what it is. So
All right.
floor is yours.
My big yes that was very life transformative was, I guess, in 2010. Felix, my oldest son, Felix, has multiple disabilities, and we were looking for a new place to live because he could get very, very, very loud, and we were in an apartment building, and it was just getting uncomfortable. And I was really lucky to be married to a lawyer who makes a lot of money. So, when I was younger, I didn't have that at all, and so like moving was always like this very difficult thing because you're always just trying to find a rent stabilized apartment or whatever. But now we had enough money to kind of find a home that would work for Felix. And I was in this like old carriage house in Brooklyn that had been it had been a stable and then had been an artist studio, and it was just this huge space with like the light coming in through the windows and old little old bits of machinery and brickwork, but basically just open, and it could have been, you could turn it into anything. And it was just like I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. And I started imagining this house that would work for my son and us. I mean, my son is, he can't walk really, but he can walk a little bit with a walker. But back then he loved to swim, and he could kind of scoot around. So he needed like flat spaces, but he also liked to kind of pull himself up. So like I was like, oh, kind of like a mini climbing wall, and we could have like a little pool. It's just like kind of going crazy. And at a certain point, I was like, oh, this is totally disgusting. This shouldn't be just for Felix. It should be for like everyone who has a kid. Like we could like make a kind of dream house living room movement space, art studio for families with kids with disabilities, and we could all share it. And that would be so great. And so I kept on fantasizing about this based on this building. And I was like, how in the world, like we had enough money to get ourselves a house, but we didn't have enough money to get two houses, like one. So I was like, well, how can we fund this? And so I called this organization called YAI, which is a big disability organization. And I was like, there's this really great space, and I could see how it could be like turned into a disability gym, and like for all different kinds of disabilities. You could have older people, younger people, intellectually disabled, physically disabled, but like, like have opportunities for us to meet in a joyful way instead of, here I am at the hospital way. And, would this be a possibility? Could YAI like help fund this? And I would volunteer to, I give all my time, like could there be something like this happen? And I mean, it was a crazy proposal. I realize now, but I was completely like smitten with this idea. And this development guy very kindly called me back, and he said it was an excellent idea, and that many of the best ideas for programs for people with disabilities comes from parents, because parents understand what's needed.
Mhm.
But he's like, but money in the disability world is very short, like it's going only to like the most necessary programs. And so like to fund something like this, you need a grassroots movement. So, I'm like making dinner for, at that point we have three, Felix, I have three kids in diapers basically. And also, um, I, up until then, my work, the work that I felt most comfortable doing, and that I love doing and that I've always done, it has been very solitary. It's, writing,
Mhm.
deep in the imagination, or painting, which is also like the way I paint is alone. It's also from the imagination. I love being in my imagination. Um, and and I really like my alone time. And I'm also, I was very shy growing up. And so the idea of like public speaking, not something I was interested in at all. And so just there's nothing in me that thought that I could start a grassroots or movement. Or
Mhm.
like just the whole idea was just like, but I was so I was making dinner, and like like there were kids all over the place, and I was like, but I was so in love with this idea. I had a feeling about the idea like I do when I have an idea for a new book. Like it was that kind of like, just, it was so rich and so like calling to me. And so I
Mhm.
was like, well, to this guy on the phone, I was like, how do you start a grassroots? Like, what does that mean? How does one start a grassroots movement? And
Mhm.
he recommended this book that I never bought, but he told me about this book. And he said, well, he's like, you just need to get the ball rolling with people. Like you have people over, you have like a spaghetti dinner, invite your friends and anyone you've met who might be interested in this idea.
Mhm.
And you propose your idea and you have a brainstorm and and so you try to get all different kinds of people to comment on it.
Mhm.
And and you kind of get a list together of what needs to be done to get to, like step one of wherever you're trying to go. And he's like, and the more people that get excited about the idea, um, the more advice you get that you can follow, that the more people become invested, and they'll try to help you.
Mhm.
And so you just never, but the only way you can start this is by inviting other people in.
Mhm.
And so I was like, okay, I love having people over for wine and cheese. Like that's easy. I can totally get some wine, get some cheese, invite some friends over. That I can do.
Mhm.
So so that was kind of my yes moment. Like I was just like, oh, I'm gonna I'm gonna try to do this.
Mhm.
Um and it was and it was really interesting because I made up a little flyer. I invited about 40 people. Like they were friends from my daughter's preschools and therapists and stuff I met through Felix, and some
Mhm.
people in the neighborhood who also had kids with disabilities. Um, and 12, I think we had 12 or 14 people came. And Felix was upstairs screaming like crazy, which was like normal life for us. But, like it was very clear like why we like it was really nice having these people, because most of them understood that people like Felix scream a lot. um
Mhm.
and and I had my this guy, our wonderful helper, was up with him. He wasn't alone screaming. But anyway, so I gave this talk and everybody was like, yes, we need that. And people were dreaming of other things they needed. They wanted art classes and they wanted music, and they were, like we had a couple I had a couple questions, like, everyone was like, you can't buy, like no one's going to give you $750,000 to
By this building.
buy this building. But you can find a little room in a community center and start, like offering some classes. Like that was, like totally within
Mhm.
what you could do. And then by having the classes, that could bring a larger group of people together. And, somebody's going to have some uncle somewhere who's going to know Bill Gates, I don't know what, but like start by gathering people. So
Mhm.
like at the end of the night, I had this kind of list of things to do. And everybody was very, very happy. And we were all a little bit tipsy, and everyone's like, like hugging each other goodbye. I kind of felt at the end of the night like it was really fun, um, but I felt like, that way when you're like, oh, I mean, everyone's just like dreaming together, but like,
Mhm.
what's that going to do? But when in the morning when I woke up, I realized I did have this list, and I
Mhm.
had all of these people who expected me to do something. So I couldn't just be like, oh, that was a great idea,
Mhm.
and it's just too much work. Or it was like that it was a pressure. Like by having the people come over, they gave me this a little bit more pressure than just my own.
Mhm.
And so it worked. Like, so it's, and like once that started, like once I started looking for a place and training teachers and stuff, it just kept building and building and building and building. And then we had a really nice organization. We never had the money to buy the house, like the house, but we had like play spaces and 3 different boroughs, and we had, great partnerships with museums, and now we have our offices are in the Brooklyn Children's Museum. So like, like
Ah, really?
out of that idea came this wonderful organization. That that's how I met Gisela, and
Mhm.
so many incredible people. Yeah.
So there was nothing like it in New York City anywhere?
No,
Mhm.
no. I mean, what there were a bunch of really great programs, enrichment programs for kids with disabilities.
Mhm.
There was swimming lessons, there was music lessons, and there was um soccer, like some soccer things. There are a bunch of neat programs all around the city, but a lot of them cost tons of money. And
Mm.
it wasn't because anyone was getting rich off of these. It's just the nature of
Mhm.
one-on-one instruction, and having to rent space in New York meant that, like a swim lesson was $70 a lesson, which,
Ye-
you know, I could afford because I was married to Jason, but I mean, 70, like that, it would just be like just a laughable sum for most people. And so I was I wanted to create something that wouldn't cost anything. Um because one of the reasons that I was so in love with this idea was that I loved the people that I kind of bumped into on the street through Felix. Like when I was walking Felix around the streets of New York City, I mean, in a lot of neighborhoods, our presence was awkward. Like just, he was really cute, but very loud.
Mhm.
Sometimes in a kind of violent way. Other times that he was just laughing uproariously. But you know, he just didn't. He didn't have any kind of manners. And
Mhm.
he was clearly disabled too. Like so, like I was always wheeling him around, and I think his um just his physical condition was such that he scared a lot of people. And so they'd look away,
Mhm.
and or they I don't know, their face would kind of freeze in a
Didn't know what to do with him
yeah,
or with the
yeah,
sight
and
of him.
it just what but then there'd be these other people who would just kind of light up and be like, "Hi," and it was just so nice, and the people that lit up when they saw Felix were just like the most diverse group of people
Mm.
I'd ever had the pleasure of interacting with. I mean, like some of them looked like me, but most of them didn't at all.
Mhm.
And when I'd walk around by myself, or when I'd walk around with my daughters who were able-bodied, that didn't have, like people would say hi, but like it was, like I was like a white privileged lady. You don't get treated like, a human being by a lot of people because of your class. And so Felix, I could kind of like escape my class with Felix. I could kind of just be a human being. And I just loved that so much. And so like if you're gonna start charging for these things, you can't all of a sudden you're just back in the same bubble. And so like it had to be free. And it had to be a place where people weren't coming to like cure their children or fix their children, but it was just a place where we could be happy and free with our kids as they were. And so like so like most of the programs there were programs that accepted the kids as they were for sure, but most of them cost money. And then the other thing was that there were these great sensory gyms where you could go. It might be paid through Medicaid or something, but if you tried to pay privately, it would be like $150 a visit. So I mean that was kind of out of almost everyone's league, but the sensory gyms themselves are really fun spaces with like ball pits and climbing walls and slides and just like really like fun hammocky things to swing on. And so I was like, oh well, we could take that idea of a sensory gym that's already created, and instead of having it be run by a therapist, just have it open for people, parents and children to play. And so many parents had already kind of seen therapists in these gyms work with their kids. They kind of knew what to do. Or they could be trained. I mean, we could give them workshops or whatever, but so those were there were lots of programs around, but there wasn't anything that was really based on bringing people together socially from different walks of life and just acceptance and what can we learn from disability instead of how can we fix disability.
And the reason why it exploded and it became this huge thing so quickly tells you everything of the need that existed, that it was huge. No, a lot of people needed a space like that. So tell us, from the moment you had that meeting with those parents and you had that list to the moment you officially started and named the organization, how long, how many days, months, years passed, and why the name? Because I love the name, Extreme Kids and Crew. So I love everything in the name. So explain how long from the idea to your dream come true and why the name.
Okay. When I had the brainstorm, I was calling it Brooklyn Funhouse.
Okay.
And then when we were trying to get like incorporated, which is one of the first things you do, turns out there already was a Brooklyn Funhouse.
Oh, really?
Brooklyn, like a party space. So we couldn't take that. And like the lawyer kind of called me up and like they needed to put in a new name like in that day. And he was like, don't worry, you can change it later, but just something. And so I had been joking with Jason about how parenting a kid like Felix was like an extreme sport. So I was like, it's kind of like extreme parenting. And then, so we were kind of laughing with that. So I was like, oh, because I was trying to think about a name that I didn't really want to have disability in the name, like I didn't want people to, I wanted it to be highlighting difference, but in a different way. And so we were like, oh, Extreme Kids. And then, but because the idea of the program wasn't just for the kids, it's for the whole family. It's a place where you could meet other parents, other siblings. And also I was hoping like therapists and people, like just friends would also find a home there. It's like crew. It's like, every person with a disability has a crew around. Oh, no, it's just everyone. Like we all have our crew, right? And so it's like, the crew is all of the people that work together to make life possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so how long did it pass between?
Oh, the time. So I guess it was March 2010 that we had that meeting, and January 2011, by then we had gotten a room in a community center, and I had trained teachers, and so we were offering our first classes in January 2011. And then
Okay.
and then by November 2011, we had our first real space, a really nice sensory gym art space in a preschool in Bed-Stuy.
So that day the lawyer called you and needed a name, that's the day you gave Extreme Kids and Crew?
Yeah, it just kind of popped into my head because I was like,
You didn't have to tweak it later.
yeah, I was like,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
And so so it's 13 years. How many years?
I guess I mean, we kind of date the beginning of the program from our first classes. So it was 2011. Yeah, so I guess it's
12 years.
Yeah.
12 years. How has it evolved in these 12 years?
Well, the first couple years, it was me and a couple friends trying to just keep this going. And then my son got a wonderful placement in a school up in New Hampshire that was a godsend. It was such a good school for him, but it meant that he was there, like he was living there. And so I needed to go up on the weekends to be with, to be with him. So all of our programming was on the weekends. So I was like, I can't keep doing this. And also the play space that we had at the co-op school, they needed the classrooms that we were using. So I was like, I was like, by that time, so many people were dependent on us. I was like, I don't know what to do. But so I ended up hiring one of our parent volunteers who was really good with all kinds of things, Caitlin Casaro, to be the new ED. And she had connections with the school in Red Hook. So through her connections, we just moved to another school in 2013, I guess, or 2014. And then, under Caitlin, but when Caitlin came, she's like has a business background, so things got much more organized. And we ended up like she really wanted to do after school programs for the kids in her school. So we ended up, because of her, we had like after school programs, and then we had the weekend stuff that I'd started. And then it was very successful. We ended up kind of replicating this school-based program in a school in Queens and a school in the Bronx. And had I guess a staff of 8 and hundreds of families. And then when COVID happened, all the in-person stuff, of course, had to end. And so they switched into a online mode that we'd actually always wanted to develop, because there's a lot of people that have a really difficult time getting out of their house, and also for teens and stuff. But some of the online stuff works better than like a play space. So by this time I was working on my farm. I'm just telling you what they did. But they developed a great online program. And unfortunately, even now that the COVID emergency has been declared over, we still haven't been allowed back into the schools where we were, because they've just redone the way they've worked. So we have now these like different clubs that meet in different places, and office in the Brooklyn Children's Museum. We're just looking for, or they're just looking for a new like big space that they can create a new and improved play and art space. I'm hoping it can be in the museum, but who knows?
I thought you were gonna say, I hope it can be that building that you liked at the beginning.
Really nice. But we still haven't found Bill Gates. So like I'm like I've been mentioning this for a long time, but nobody's introduced us yet. Yeah.
Is that building still available or?
No, somebody else bought it. It was such
Yeah.
a great, but anyway, it doesn't like something. Maybe the point of the building was to give me the idea, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So before saying this huge yes to dreaming something that didn't exist before, and to starting a grassroots movement when you were kind of shy and public speaking wasn't your thing, had you done anything this big?
Well, I'd been very involved.
Besides giving birth to your kids?
Yeah. I mean, I've done a lot of like student filmmaking, like and filmmaking in New York in the early '90s, and there's a lot of similarities between like it's like organizing lots of people to do something, and it being kind of impossible. Like making films is always impossible. I mean, it's a little easier now that everyone can make one on their phone, but back then, I mean, just like the amount of just just all of the equipment and all of the different the boom and the director of photography and the assistant camera and the actors. I mean, just like, and no money, and you can pay anybody anything, and you didn't have the permit, and just like it's like total creative chaos, and and then somehow it happens. Just so like I had been involved in that sort of thing.
Okay.
And I mean, as a producer of that sort of thing. So it wasn't like it wasn't that I didn't, I wasn't, I believed I had the skills to make something like that happen. It was just, it was more like the word, like grassroots movement just seemed so intimidating.
What was the title of that book that
I don't know. And I tried to get back with, like to call the development guy at YAI who had like kind of pushed me off this cliff. But he had left, and like, then I lost his name. It's like, he's just this mysterious person who told me what to do. And then like, when I tried to thank him, he had left, and there was no way to get back. Now I can't remember his name.
And you never read the book?
No,
I mean, told you about it.
No, it was like get people over, get them to start the snowball rolling, and yeah.
Okay, so in a way, you have these tools, you have this background that help you say yes, finally, to this idea. After you've done this, do you feel you have even more tools in your toolbox to go after another big yes, or a small yes, but that seems very interesting to you?
Yeah, no, it definitely gave me a lot of confidence that these things can be done, and that people really want to help. Like, there's so many people that really want to, if you can, people want opportunities to do meaningful things. They just really do. And you don't get as many opportunities. Like, there's a lot of things that seem good, but you get there and you're just like, I just feel like I'm standing around. And like, that, so there's like, we can really, people understand the necessity for the kind of projects that integrate people with disabilities into the rest of the community. And and tons of people understand that we all at some point are disabled, and want to just jump into that way of being instead of trying to push it away. So there's just there's lots of people out there that really want to get involved, and so if you can give them something clear to do, they grab it, and then they're happy, and then and that energy generates more energy, generates more energy, generates more energy. So it's really just like kind of finding projects that bring people together.
Okay. So you also mentioned that you are a writer. Have you ever written a book about how you created with other people, Extreme Kids and Crew, and kind of leave a master class to other people who may read your book on how to do these things. Have you ever done that?
I did do that.
What is the book?
The book is called Strange Beauty. Strange
Wow.
Beauty, a portrait of my son. So it's a memoir, but it's
Okay.
a lot of it is about starting Extreme Kids and everything that taught me. So yeah, it's a good master class. Yeah.
Strange Beauty?
Strange Beauty.
When did you publish it?
2017.
Okay. So 7 years more or less since
It's still
began with the idea.
It's, or at least you can still get it online. I don't know if I have it. There's a wonderful, it's taught at a wonderful seminar at Columbia, and I get to go every year and meet these students who are in this seminar. It's like the best thing in the world for a writer to actually
A
be
seminar on your book?
No, well, no, it's included in this seminar. That it's this great group of students that volunteer at a old age home in Harlem, and they volunteer 4 hours a week, and then they go to this class, and every week they read another book that will kind of inform on their experience. And
Okay.
so and the books are like, I mean, there's like Being Mortal, there's like books from, like, there's religious books, there's philosophical books, there's books about what is life and consciousness and all this kind of stuff. And so they had my book in there because it delves deeply into nonverbal communication, and a lot of these people are grouped with a senior who doesn't necessarily use language anymore. And so that's why it's there. But so like, it's just so fun to meet these kids, because, well, they're just really remarkable people. That how busy people in college are as seniors, and the idea that they're finding 4 hours a week to volunteer, and just taking this kind of class.
What is the feedback that you've gotten from them when you go?
It's such good feedback. I mean, it's a good story, like, so they're all, it's just they're all they all like reading it, because I think they like reading it because it's so personal. It's so, like, it's a really deep dive into like who Felix is. And a lot of the times when you read about people with kind of this, I mean, like, you just don't get that granular, you don't get such a clear personality. It's more like, this population needs this, and these are the kinds of tools that you can use. And it's not like, I don't know what to do, I'm drinking too much, I mean, like, it's not just like an honest account of what it's actually like to parent somebody and to love someone that you really fundamentally don't understand on some level. Yeah.
You also mentioned you have a farm.
Yeah, so that's like the yes that followed from Extreme Kids is this farm where I'm actually at. We finally do have the space for not exactly what I was envisioning when I started Kids.
It's not the Brooklyn building.
Not a Brooklyn building. It's 29 acres in the Hudson Valley, and we're building a farmhouse and a house for Felix and for this program. But the idea is we'll have a weekday program for adults with disabilities, so they can work on the farm and make crafts and stuff, and sell them in a little farmhouse. Eventually, when the trees grow, there'll be like a wheelchair accessible orchard. So, so we can have both people, we can provide like a kind of work program, volunteer program for a regular crew of people, say like 12 people. But then we can have families come in for just a day to pick apples and have, take walks around and stuff like that. So it can be both a destination and a study program for a smaller group.
Wow, that also sounds like a huge endeavor. So now I'm wondering if this close contact with nature, the animals, the plants, has that given you a different or a deeper understanding on what disability means? Because nature, like just thinking of plants, the plants are what they are, and if you go to the woods, you can see so many different varieties, and some we may judge them as beautiful and some you may judge them as not. The plants are just are. So I'm wondering if you in this close contact with nature have a different or a deeper understanding on what disability means in the human world.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that was part of the idea always, was to try to rejigger people's understanding that we're all just part of nature, and disability is a part of nature, and the idea that like everybody should look the same and act the same isn't reflected anywhere in nature, and
Mhm.
it's not good for us as a species. I mean, like, you need variety. I mean, it's just like in the same way that like monocultures aren't good for
Mhm.
farming. And so that's always been there, but that's like when I was in the city, that was much more of an idea. And the wonderful thing about spending 4 days a week in nature is that it's just so much richer than an idea, and you
Mhm.
don't have to speak it, like if you can have people out there just relaxing, that knowledge just implants itself in you in some way. I mean, I think speaking it is useful sometimes, but it's kind of it's a weak type of intelligence. It's not a strong, deep intelligence.
Mhm.
And so yeah, to get people, particularly people in the city,
Mhm.
have that time just to see and smell and touch all of these different life forms that all have
Mhm.
different forms, and figure out ways to live without a branch, or without, like, yeah, this plant is sick right now, but come back later and look at it. It's like the incredible regeneration. And
Mhm.
sometimes things don't get better, and then they sink back into the soil, and they enrich the soil. It's just, I mean, that just
Mhm.
that cycle of
Mhm.
how life works that we
Mhm.
forget, and when we're surrounded by concrete and
Buildings and
spreadsheets. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So yeah, that's very important.
Have you written a book about this second
Oh,
project? Are you
no, I am writing like just a weekly blog. I'm working right now on a book, just a novel that I've been working on for ages. So if this novel ever gets finished, I'll probably write more about the experience of this farm, because it's really interesting. Yeah.
your novels or the work that doesn't have anything specifically to do with Extreme Kids and Crew or the farm? What are they about? What is that calls you when you're writing novels or fiction or whatever you write?
Um, all of my novels sprung from this one story that came into my head, when I was like 27, I think. It's just, it was kind of like it all sprung from a trip I'd taken 9 years earlier to the desert. It was just like this very powerful story, that takes a long time to tell. So I like the first the and I studied. I was always really interested in American history.
Mhm.
So the novels are very much about that, um, but they're also really informed by Mercury and the desert and animals.
What happened in the desert that time that you had that experience?
Oh God. I'd gone out to the Big Bend of Texas, um, because it was the last place a friend of mine had been who was kidnapped, or he was disappeared, and we thought he was dead. And I wanted to um, just be in the desert, because I told him to go there. He was going down to South America, and that was the last place he'd been in North America, and so it was my way of just settling. Well, and I love the desert also, so I was kind of driven to go back there, but it was specifically because that was the last place he'd been there. And I was walking, I met this guy there, and we were walking through this very, very hot desert plain. And it was like 110 degrees, it was gorgeous, beautiful landscape. And we came across this, these bleached planks over this hole. And there was this hot, horrible smelling gas coming up from the hole. This is my dog. Yeah, imagine. And it was like, wait a second, let me just, sorry. So yeah, so out of this hole, this like sulfuric, I don't know, it was probably like 120 or 150. I mean, it's so hot. And it was so much hotter than this 110. And I was like, what is this? Like, it felt like it was like a little like trapdoor into hell or something like that. And it was abandoned mercury mine. And so I was like, and so there's all this there's a lot of sulfur in cinnabar, which is the ore that the mercury is taken out of. But I was like, oh my God, men went down into that. Like, oh. So anyway, that image came back 10 years later. And my friend who had disappeared actually returned back miraculously. So yeah, it was all of that. That was a very happy story, but there was a lot of suffering before the happy ending. Yeah. So
your stories that's kind of the origin of.
Yeah, I really feel like it all came from that shaft, that mercury shaft. But so the first novel is about, I mean, feel like I'm going on forever, but the first novel is about American, like a Yankee who goes down to the desert with the idea of kind of starting a workers' utopia, but the economic engine of this utopia is this mercury mine. And so, there's there's like environmental complications, and I mean, his mother was an abolitionist, so he has all these kind of, in some ways, admirable ideas about getting rid of like American ideas of race. But on the other hand, he wants to be in charge, and he's a white guy, so it's like, there's the it's kind of a study of American dreams and self deception. And then so it starts with anyway, and his daughter ends up being a woman who can talk to snakes. And so this book I'm working on now is when she's a snake dancer in Europe during World War II, and they're trying to escape the Nazis. Yeah.
So there's 2 novels?
Well, there's another one, Love Maps, which is the third. So the Mercury Fountain and Love Maps have both been published, and the middle one, which takes place in World War II, is the one that's
you're working on right now?
Yeah.
Why is that taking you
so long?
Look, it feels like you're working hard on this one, but it's not ready to be out, to be birthed. What's happening with this one?
Well, I mean, I think it always takes me a long time. I mean, it took like, well, I guess the other ones I wrote pretty quickly, but it took like 10 years to get them published, just because it's so hard to get or for me, it's not an easy road. And this one, I think I've been doing, I don't know, I wrote it and it came out quickly, but and my agent loved it and tried to sell it because she thought it was great. But no one bought it. And then I was like, oh, I think I didn't like when I looked at it, I thought the structure was off. So I had to radically change the whole structure. And so I'm just, it's just one of these things. But it's it's not surprising for me to work for years and years and years on a novel.
Before going to the no, so last question on your writing, because I'm very curious about that. So it seems you're writing like a series. So you wrote the 1, the 3, and now you're working on number 2. Do you have a number, or do you have do you know when the story is going to end?
When this is done, it's over. No, that's the story I needed to tell when I was 27. Will be finished when the middle is finished. And I'll be so relieved. It's been, I can't wait till it's finished. I mean, I love writing, but it's been because the characters have this way of you feel indebted to them, you have to get them into the atmosphere, they're suffocating inside. So they have to get into other people's heads. So
it's funny because I'm thinking, you have 3 kids.
Yeah.
You're birthing the 3rd book, but you have 2 huge projects. I'm wondering what the 3rd is going to be. So you have Extreme Kids, you have the farm, and then.
Oh yeah, I don't know what it is yet, but I don't need it. I'm fine as I am.
No, you need it right now, but I'm just curious to see in the future what your 3rd thing is going to be.
Yeah.
And then you have 3 pockets of 3.
Yeah.
We'll find out, Eliza.
Find out. Yeah. I intend on sticking around to find out. So yeah.
Good. Okay, so now let's switch to the moment in your life when you decided that saying no was a much better idea.
Oh, this is going to sound funny to a lot of parents out there, but it was when I dropped out of college. It was. I'm telling this story particularly now because so many of my friends have kids that age and they're upset that their kids are going off and doing their own thing, and I'm like, oh, that's so, just let them do what they need to do. It's okay. But yeah, I didn't I had I had one of the, actually another reason probably why I felt like I could do Extreme Kids is because I grew up in Washington, D.C., and there was a really great punk rock movement there. All of these kids, even some of the kids dropped out of high school, but they were making their own music. They made their own record label, or they did. They made their own record label, and we're organizing shows and selling their stuff and making connections with kids all over Europe and South America and Mexico. Yeah, and not so much. Yeah, Australia. Anyway, it was a real international scene of kids making music and sleeping on each other's sofas and all that kind of stuff. And so that idea that you can do something, you can just do it. You don't need a degree. You don't need you don't need a lot of money. You need a lot of people, because a lot of people can somehow get you the money. And so anyway, I grew up in that kind of environment, and there was just a lot of, or at least from my perspective, I wasn't ever really, I came from a privileged background. My all of my grandparents had gone to college, and so it was just kind of expected that you would go to college. It wasn't like an honor or anything. It was just that's what you did. And I just really didn't like school, and I felt like the whole idea of going to get a degree so that I could have a job somebody else couldn't get, it just kind of disgusted me. I wanted to be free, and I didn't want to be part of, I was young. I didn't want to be part of middle class America at all. And so of course I am completely, enormously part of middle class America, but back then I was trying hard not to be. And so I had decided to go to NYU just because I really loved New York City, and I always felt at home here, and I couldn't figure out any other way to get here. But so I went for a year and loved the city and thought my classes were fine, but kind of dumb. And I just decided it was stupid to go. I was like standing in line, trying to register for next year. And it was like one of these, it was back before there were computers. So you had to stand in like these long lines that would go like 2 hours to like write, like to see if the class was open.
Mhm.
And then, of course, if the class wasn't open, then you had to redo your whole schedule and wait. It's just like, it was this absurd 3-day ordeal. And I was like, why am I doing this when I don't want to go to these classes? It's tons of money. And I know how to work, and I had been working for years by then. And I've been, I lived on my own, and I knew how to, I wasn't taking money from my parents when I was living on my own. So I was just like, I'm not doing this, and walked out of that line and just, worked in restaurants and made art and traveled around the country and just supported myself, and had just a wonderful 3 or 4 years of real freedom. And it's just been, it was so great to have that, particularly, when I ended up getting married and having kids and stuff, and had absolutely no more freedom. I loved my life, but there was no freedom at all. I did have those wonderful years of doing exactly what I wanted to do. And I just always felt that was so precious. So
how did your parents react to you saying no to college?
Well, my parents had split up. My parents, I had already said no to so many things before then. I'd kind of left home at 16, and I'd put off NYU for a year beforehand to work at a nightclub. So I think by then they were kind of used to me just doing what I needed to do. They were like, we're not going to pay for you to, just not go to college. But I was like, I know. I didn't need their money.
It's interesting how, if I continue scratching into your past, then this new Eliza comes to light. And then I understand much better your huge yes to Extreme Kids and Crew.
Yeah.
So you had this whole history, even though you were kind of shy, you said, when you were a kid, you have this whole history of, you can stand on your own 2 feet, you can survive on your own, you know how to work, you know how to get things done, you know how to follow your heart. So by the time this idea comes to your mind with Felix and what you want for other families, it's like, oh, so this is Eliza.
Yes, that's so true. No, I've been very, I think lucky. Other people would say, oh, you poor thing. But my inner voice is very strong. I've never been able to do stuff that other people seem to do, because I just hate it too much. Office, I couldn't work in it. There's certain things I just can't do. It's just why I understand. I have such an affinity for, the disabled, because it's like they don't fit in, and there's so much of me that doesn't fit in. I'm like, oh yeah, let's just make a space outside where we can fit in easily.
It's going against the grain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So lovely. Okay. Well, Eliza, anything else you would like to say about this conversation, about these yeses you've mentioned, the no's you mentioned, before we close this lovely conversation?
No, it's a real honor to be able to discuss this with you, and come to the farm.
Yes.
Come visit. Yeah. We have a website, so you can check it out, and but come visit in person too. Yeah.
We'll make sure we make a trip over to your place. It would be lovely, and to meet you in person.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Eliza, for having come to What If I Say Yes. Thank you for sharing your story and your yeses and your no's. And good luck with the farm.
Thank you.
And with the novel.
Thank you. I'll let you know when it's finally done.
Yes. Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much. And send me pictures, images, whatever you would like to share with the audience.
Okay,
It would be lovely to see some of the things you have been doing and working on.
okay, I'll do that.
Okay.
All right,
Wait.
bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Eliza. Bye.